Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Front Row Access podcast. I am your host, Steven Russo.
Anthony Gonzalez.
Let's fucking go! All right, guys. So today we're doing another fighter spotlight for you guys, and this one's gonna be a little rough for you, boy, and his other boy. Today we will be covering the career of Tony El Kukui Ferguson, the rise and fall of
So far.
the rise and
He's
fall
not retired yet.
so far.
So far.
So that's what we're going to be getting into today. But of course, first things first, go follow us on all social media. Well, not all social media platforms. We're on X. We're on TikTok for as long as that stays around. We're on Instagram and of course here on YouTube, Front Row Access Podcast. So go ahead and follow us there. Also, Pepsi, hit us up. We got your product right here. We got the Baja Blast. We got the green. We got the code red. 2 code reds. Also, Logan Paul, KSI. We got Prime here for you. So hit us up. Let us know. Give me sponsorship because I need money, please. Anyway. So, Tony El Kukui Ferguson. Anthony, first thoughts on Tony Ferguson when you heard me talking about him the first time.
So, Tony Ferguson is a nightmare and the boogeyman of the division. When you first were talking about him to me.
Yep.
Really, really good. Really strong. Well-rounded and capable of getting that championship for sure. He has had in him. And honestly, always kind of missed the shot with the matches that were kind of screwed him over, be it catch weight, be it, oh, you have to cancel this, so I'm pulling out because of this, so I can't do. Really, just a really sad state for how one of the greats turned up when I finally actually got on.
Yeah, this guy, man, Tony Ferguson, obviously a legend in MMA and UFC in general. You guys know the story. You know, he had that long fucking win streak that he had for a while. How his reputation as the boogeyman of the division. Like, this dude was the Hamzat Chimaev of the lightweight division for a time. And of course, we're gonna get into that in more detail later on in the podcast. But of course, every story has a beginning. So I want to take you all the way back to February 12th, 1984, 40 years ago. In Oxnard, California, a little boy named Tony Ferguson was born. Okay, and all throughout his school career and high school career, he played football and baseball and wrestling. So this dude has been athletic for his entire life and is no stranger to sports, no stranger to anything like that. You know, always had the always had the capabilities, always had the credentials. Very athletic guy. He went to Muskegon Catholic Central High School in Michigan because he grew up in Michigan despite him being born in California. And, you know, one of his big accolades that he got with his sporting outings was he was a 3-time All-State draftee, and he actually won the 152-pound divisional title when he was in high school. And he continued his education at the Central Michigan University and participated in many school fights while he was at college, because of course he fucking did, because he's Tony fucking Ferguson. So despite his love for wrestling and all of that, you know, he kept getting into too many fights, and I can almost guarantee you his grades probably weren't that great. So naturally he kind of stopped at some point.
I'm just imagining him just walking on his freaking campus, just like, I want that guy, and then just going.
I want that guy. That guy looked at me funny. I'm gonna go beat him up now. So yeah, this guy, of course, like I said, he's always been athletic. He's always been, you know, this like always been a credentialed guy. Always could do what he could when he could. And you know, he would start his MMA career in 2008 after he moved back to California after he was done with college. So you know, but he also worked in marketing and sales, and he also bartended on the side when he first moved back to California, just trying to set in his way to, you know, make sure he was up to speed on everything. Got to recover from all those school fights, you know. And so yeah, 2008 he would full dive into being an MMA fighter. He'd do a lot of small fights on regional circuits, and you know, he would actually end up joining the Ultimate Fighter in 2010 with a record of 10-2. A 10-2 amateur record going into the Ultimate Fighter. Isn't that kind of nuts?
Scary motherfucker.
scary motherfucker when he was, and this was when he was young. He wasn't even in his prime yet, and he was still ripping shit up. And like I said, he went into Ultimate Fighter for in 2010. Oh my goodness, my headphones are like being really whack with me right now. There we go.
Suicide.
There we go. All right, we're back at it now. Where's our round of applause? I figured it out. I twiddled a little doohickey, and I got here.
Technical difficulties have been solved.
Anyway, so we're gonna talk about his not much to go on off of his early MMA career. So we're just gonna jump right into his stint on the Ultimate Fighter. He was on Team Brock Lesnar. Isn't that crazy? He was on Team Lesnar on the Lesnar versus Dos Santos edition of the Ultimate Fighter. So, and he would actually end up winning the whole season in the finals with a KO over this guy named Ramsey Nijem. And he would go on a 2-fight winning streak after obtaining his UFC contract.
Well, he's El Kokua. What were you expecting?
Exactly. Now, this guy in the Ultimate Fighter, he was like exciting. He's unorthodox. He finished all of his fights. I looked into the other records, like his qualifying round, his quarterfinals. All of them are finishes. Whether it be a submission, KO, or TKO, Tony Ferguson was definitely proving himself to be one of the most exciting fighters and most unorthodox fighters.
Get that man out of there!
To, grace the octagon presence. And,
So you either got knocked out, you tapped out, or they said, get this guy off.
Yep. And that was Tony Ferguson, guys, which is fucking crazy. And, it makes complete sense knowing Tony Ferguson, though. So, I'm shifting. Oh, yeah. So, anywho, he would obtain his UFC contract, and he would go on a 2-fight winning streak after obtaining it. But he would come up short against Michael Johnson. That's okay. A lot of good fighters have come up short against Michael Johnson. This dude, okay, we're going off on a tangent a little bit further away from Tony Ferguson, and just gonna talk about fucking Michael Johnson real quick. This guy is like the biggest coin flip fighter in the history of like anything. Like one day this guy's really, really fucking good. He's beating people like Tony Ferguson and knocking out Dustin Poirier. And then he also loses to like an unranked guy that just got here like yesterday. And so I mean, choose which version of Michael Johnson you face. I mean, just you never know. You're either gonna get absolutely fucking clapped or you're gonna dog walk the guy. It just his record speaks for itself. You don't know his record. You gotta look it up. It's basically 50-50. I've never seen anything like it. It's just Michael Johnson, man. But anyway, he would come up short against Michael Johnson. But of course, that wouldn't stop people from liking Tony Ferguson. His stock wouldn't drop a cent. Because like I said, on his time at Ultimate Fighter, he was one of the most exciting guys. And one of the best fighters on the roster. One of the most intriguing characters on the roster. I don't want to say characters because they're not characters. But at the same time, Tony Ferguson's... Yeah, Tony Ferguson's a bit of a character, to say the least. But, after that,
Felt a bit of a cult following that one there.
Oh, yeah. We love Tony Ferguson for that.
We do.
But, even though he lost, he was still revered as one of the most exciting fighters, like I mentioned. And, of course, all the hope in the world for him. This was early on in his career. It's okay to lose. It's okay to lose early in your career.
Especially before your experience, before you have that technique down while you're still on the up and up.
And, that loss to Michael Johnson probably did a lot for Tony Ferguson as a fighter in general. So, after that loss, it would speak for itself because then Tony would go on to absolutely tear through the lightweight division from 2013 to 2019. He would go on in 6 years of fucking just ripping shit up. He went on a 12-fight winning streak. The only person that was tying with him was Khabib. We'll get into that later. But, he would be, in his like extreme stint from 2013 to 2019, he would beat some big names. Edson Barbosa. He would beat Rafael Dos Anjos, a former champion. Kevin Lee, who was a very dangerous guy at the time. Of course, he's gone by the wayside now. But he would beat Kevin Lee and another big name like Cowboy Cerrone. He beat all of these guys on his 6-year, 12-fight winning streak. That's like nobody can do that, bro. Like nobody in the history of ever has done something like that outside of Khabib. Once again, we'll get to that later. But
This just goes to show how much of a battler this guy was and how much he loved the sport. Because at this point, it's it's one thing to show up for a fight, guys. We all see them; they're amazing to look at. But to consistently show up and to consistently win all these names, you gotta know something special about them. You know?
and through this stint, Tony Ferguson would even become an interim champion at one point, like even slated to face Conor McGregor, who left two divisions on hold for couple years.
Greggy didn't want to defend.
Greggy didn't want to defend. I mean, even when Tony Ferguson won his interim title, he won that interim title when he fought Kevin Lee, and even after the done, he goes, "Where the fuck you at, McNuggets?" He just called him out like that. That's unfortunate that that fight never came to be. And also, I gotta talk about this. Like I said, we're gonna get into it later. I gotta get into Tony Ferguson's cursed fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov and his missed opportunities with Conor McGregor. Because how could I talk about Tony Ferguson and not, you know, go into this? Like, so through this 12 fight winning streak, finishing people left and right, winning close decisions, going through wars, submitting people, doing any and everything that he possibly can to win these fights, he never fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, who was another guy who was just dog walking people at the time. And they tried to make this fight between Khabib and Tony for like 5 times. They tried to make this fight, and it just never materialized, which is just unfortunate to say the least, because that would have been a great fight to see, especially both the guys in the prime.
I was gonna say at that point in the roster, was it like, all right, you want to be fit to that guy or you want to be fit to that guy? Your choice.
And both times you go, I don't want to fight Khabib. He's gonna wrestle me to death. Give me Tony Ferguson. Oh, wait a minute. Ah! So when you're a lightweight in between 2013 and 2019, that's just not the guy you wanted. Those are just not the guys you wanted to fight. Like, you don't have anybody else. There's no one else.
They're all injury. Oh yeah, they were just fighting these two. So
fuck. So yeah, any lightweight, it spelled doom, fear in their eyes whenever their names came up, and they knew that they would get into something crazy, that it might not go the way that they want it to go, and they know it's going to be a dangerous war. So we're going to talk about the first time. I mean, this fight, like, despite their dominance and their prominence in the division, active fighters, they never fought each other, which is just crazy to think about, that it just never happened. And they tried to do it 5 fucking times, and every time it failed. I'm like, Jesus Christ. We guess we just we weren't meant to we weren't meant to have these nice things, I guess.
Not meant to happen in this timeline, my good sir.
Maybe in another universe, maybe in a different timeline, but not this one. So the first time they tried to make this a fight was on 12/11/2015. It would be the Tough 22 finale, and this was the first time that I think they were both coaches on the show. So therefore, this was going to be their fight. They were going to go and they were going to do it because the Ultimate Fighter coaches are supposed to fight each other.
Yeah, that's a standard tradition. The Ultimate Fighter coaches always fight each other. It's a made match.
Where you at, Greggy? But
Greggy not showing up again.
As per usual, holds up 2 divisions for the better part of 2-3 years, and fucking.
Not that he'll ever hear it, but I think he might just be a scaredy cat.
Maybe. Anyway, so that would be the first time that they tried to fight. Unfortunately, that would be canceled due to an injury that Khabib Nurmagomedov would sustain leading up to the fight. So this was the first time that it was canceled and couldn't come to be. And then next time they tried to reschedule this fight on April 16th, 2016. God damn, I was in 6th grade. Holy shit.
I was already 4 years out, man.
He was already 4 years out at that point, but shit. 4/16/2016. It was supposed to be on UFC Fox 19. So for those of y'all that don't know, before ESPN Plus before ESPN owned UFC, UFC was owned by Fox. So they would do all their fight nights that you would see now on ESPN Plus. They would hold them on the Fox network. And so on UFC Fox 19, they were supposed to fight again as like a main event. like 5 rounds. And Ferguson would be forced to pull due to a lung issue. He had something wrong with his lungs, and he had to pull out of the fight. So this second time couldn't happen. Now, they tried to reschedule this fight again
What? Really?
on March 4th, 2017 for UFC 209. And the interim championship was supposed to be on the line because, Conor McGregor's absence. They had to make an interim champion to be the champ while the champ's away.
Greggy not showing up again?
What?
Why?
No, what are we talking about? So anyway, unfortunately, Khabib had to pull from the fight due to weight cut problems, and then the fight was canceled. So then the co-main event, which was supposed to be Stephen Thompson versus Tyron Woodley, would take the spot as the main event. Which, great fight. Go back and watch that one. But I think this was their second fight. Yeah, the first time they fought was on 205 when McGregor won the double champ status, I believe. So, anyway, so unfortunately Khabib pulled due to his weight cut issue, and then the fight was canceled completely. Now, enter UFC 223. This was supposed to happen on This happened, should I say, on April 7th, 2018. And it was supposed to be for the undisputed title, since they had vacated the interim championship and the undisputed championship because, you guessed it, Conor McGregor's absence.
No.
So this one was supposed to be for the undisputed gold at the time, and of course, UFC 223. That's also the fight when Conor McGregor showed up and threw the fucking thing at the bus. For those of y'all that don't remember that, yeah, Conor McGregor did do that. Literal property damage. Had to do some community service time for that. But unfortunately, it was supposed to be for the undisputed gold, and that would have been a hell of a lightweight title fight because at that time, 2018, yeah, 15, 16, 17, they're not quite at their prime yet. They're approaching it and they're beating people, but they wouldn't really hit like their prime age, like 28, 29, like entering that prime finally until 2018. And this would have been a crazy lightweight title fight because it was the two best guys at the time. Like I said, Tony has that win streak. Khabib had that win streak. Why these guys never fought was fucking crazy.
So where's Greggy?
He wanted to box Floyd Mayweather, okay? He wanted to make some cash. And to be honest, I mean, even though he gave a masterclass of a performance against Eddie Alvarez to dethrone him, he just never, ever fought again. I would have loved to see that fight between Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor when Tony was interim champ.
All bark, no bite?
Maybe.
Sorry, shitting on Greggy's kind of a fun thing for me to do.
You know, the fact that we're doing this a day before St. Patrick's Day, as well.
Hey, if there was no cause to do it, it wouldn't be done.
This is true. But anyway, Tony would end up tripping on a cord. He tripped on a cord.
Cord took him out, man.
A cord took him out 6 days prior to the fight, and he fucking blew his knee out. And I'm like, oh my god. What the fuck? Like 6 days before this crazy fight was supposed to happen. 6 fucking days. And then Tony tripped on the cord, man. And then that was it. So he had to cancel the fight. He couldn't compete on that knee. So therefore, Ally Aquinta would step in, who was number like fucking 10 at the time. I guess everybody else was booked at this current moment.
No, they're all recovering from their fights with Khabib and Ferguson.
Per chance. But yeah, so Ally Aquinta would step in versus Khabib, and I think you know how this one goes. You put number 1 against number 10. Yeah, sure, Ally Aquinta, he was tough as nails. He was a good fighter. He had a lot of heart, but heart doesn't win you titles, man. Skills do. And Khabib had more skill than Ally Aquinta. Absolutely fucking dog walked him and became undisputed champion that way. Which sucks, because he kind of just got handed the fucking belt. And he didn't have to go through Tony fucking Ferguson.
People not having to go through the gauntlet to go for title shots. Nope, can't think of any reason that would be.
Conor McGregor. Anyway. So, Ally Aquinta would lose the fight, naturally. And then Your new champion would be Khabib Nurmagomedov. And then next time that this fight was supposed to happen, UFC 249 on April was supposed to go down on, well, it did go down on April 18th, 2020. And unfortunately, the build up to this fight was great. It looked like that was finally going to happen this time. I think Tony was coming off of his win against Cowboy Cerrone at this current moment, and of course recovering from tripping on a fucking cord. Um, and so he recovered. It looked like finally this is going to happen, but unfortunately, the Earth had other plans, and a pandemic broke out, and everybody went on lockdown. March 13th, 2020, 4 years ago, and you know, canceling this fight because Khabib couldn't travel because of the COVID restrictions. So, Tony Ferguson would have to fight another American at the time, so the international travel wouldn't have to be a thing. So Justin Gaethje would step in on Khabib's behalf, but they did try to get McGregor to step in, but once again, COVID happened, and unfortunately, that couldn't happen for McGregor either. Plus, at that time, he's coming off of a suspension.
Yeah,
He's
would he have actually shown up? That's the question I
yeah,
ask.
he's coming off a suspension and a big win over Cowboy Cerrone earlier in that year. Yeah, wow, both Tony
They
and
both beat
they both
Cerrone.
beat Cerrone. I know Tony did it in 2019, and then fucking Connor did it in 2020 at the very beginning. If you remember that card, Conor McGregor absolutely dog walked Cowboy Cerrone. It was his first fight back after the Khabib loss, and after his year long suspension, because once again, he
You
still
don't you don't throw chairs
you
at
don't throw chairs
buses.
at buses, and you don't jump a person's camp after the fight's done and get into a fight with them. I mean, Khabib was the one that ended up jumping the camp, but as soon as that happens, then the bench is cleared. Like, ever seen a thing in baseball, like some dude gets hit by a pitch, the batter gets pissed off, and then he looks at the pitcher, and it looks like it's just gonna be a fight between a pitcher and the batter, but then the fucking bench is clear. Yeah, that's essentially what happened between Khabib's team and McGregor's team here, including them two after going through a war, and Habib ultimately submitting Conor McGregor in the fourth round. Y'all saw the fight, and so anyway, Conor wasn't available. He couldn't do it. Travel restrictions again, and then Justin Gaethje would step in. Now, guys, this is where it gets a little sad. This is where it gets real sad. So y'all know the title here. It's UFC 249. You guys know what happened at UFC 249. Justin Gaethje would absolutely demolish Tony Ferguson, despite Tony Ferguson being the favorite to win that fight. And Gaethje would end that 6 year long winning streak, that 12 fight winning streak, in one fight. Just dog walking Tony Ferguson. Well, not dog walking him, but he was definitely beating his ass. And, fuck Tony's face up. He took so much damage in that fight. Now, keep in mind, guys, Tony was absorbing strikes from Justin fucking Gaethje. This dude's got, like, cinder blocks for
Yeah, I was
hands.
gonna say feeling his fist in any type of impact form on you is not something I would wish on
Or his
anyone.
shins, for that matter. Ask Dustin Poirier. But, so this dude, I mean, stone in his hands, and his fucking leg kick was giving Tony so much trouble. Obviously, he's eating Gaethje left hooks and Gaethje uppercuts. The fact that he ate all these punches from Gaethje is something that we should definitely acknowledge, because nobody just eats that many punches from Justin Gaethje like that. But unfortunately, when you eat punches from Justin Gaethje, you subtract years off of your life. So that's exactly what happened to Tony Ferguson here. It even got to a point that Tony was at the end of the fight, he's like shaking like this, like trying to get himself back into the fight, right? And then it got so scary to the point that Tony Ferguson's whole face changed. It was all swelled up, bloodied. Took an absolute beating from Justin Gaethje, and then he that would be the first time that Gaethje would the first time that a fighter would finish the ultimate finisher in Tony Ferguson. So of course Herb Dean stepped in, TKO win for Justin Gaethje in like the fifth round, and Gaethje is now your interim champion. on his way to fight Khabib, and any hopes of Tony Ferguson facing Khabib after this would be gone. Because as you guys know, Justin Gaethje would go on to challenge Khabib and lose by a triangle choke, and then Khabib would retire, and we haven't seen him since. So,
I mean, we did see him. He came up when Oliveira lost his title. He was in the corner.
oh yeah, he was in the corner, but
we see him. He makes occasional cameos.
I mean, like fighting.
Yeah, we don't see him in the ring.
Yeah, you don't see him like in the ring anymore. So that would be the last time we ever saw him compete, and then that would just crush all hopes of Tony Ferguson versus Khabib ever happening. And let me tell you guys, that loss to Justin Gaethje, like I said, eating shots from Justin Gaethje is a recipe for like subtracting years off of your life. Tony Ferguson, I shit you not, has not been the same since this exact fight. If you were to pinpoint exactly where Tony Ferguson's like downfall happened, it's this fight right here. And Justin Gaethje fucked him up, obviously. And you know, it was just crazy. And then Tony's just been on an absolute downfall ever since. So after the Gaethje loss, Tony has been, including the Gaethje loss, Tony has been on a 7-fight losing streak, despite having that illustrious 12-fight winning streak for 6 years. For the past 4, he's done nothing but lose. And it's very unfortunate to see one of your favorite fighters, one of the greats of this division, absolutely fall. So the next loss, I mean, obviously on May 9th, 2020, Gaethje would TKO Tony, and it would be the first time that Tony Ferguson would ever be stopped in a fight. The next fight, UFC 256, on December 12th, 2020, Charles Oliveira would win a unanimous decision over Tony Ferguson. I mean, granted, he took Charles Oliveira to the distance. Nobody fucking does that. And I mean, he survived a very. If you guys have seen the clip, you have seen the armbar that fucking Charles Oliveira put Tony Ferguson in, and the fact that Tony Ferguson kept fighting after that crazy armbar just speaks to his toughness. And then, after the Oliveira lost, UFC 262 on May 15th, 2021, Beneil Dariush would get a unanimous decision victory over Tony Ferguson. Now, to this point, also in that fight, Beneil Dariush locked in a nasty fucking heel hook on Tony Ferguson, and once again, Tony being the fucking dog that he is, the tenacious motherfucker that he is, I don't know what this dude's pain tolerance is, but he would survive, and he would keep fighting. And, I mean, to this point, guys, like, obviously, we would see, he went through that war with Gaethje, he got TKO'd. That's fair. You got TKO'd by Justin Gaethje, and he put a beating on you. You went to war with him. And then you lost a decision to Charles Oliveira despite hanging in there. You lost a decision to Beneil Dariush, but you still hung in there. So, like, at this point, we're just thinking, man. After that loss to Charles Oliveira and Dariush, we're starting to think, like, ooh, yikes, what's going on here, Tony?
Well, any fight that might lead to facial reconstruction surgery is probably going to change you in some aspect in regards to how you approach fights afterwards.
I mean, Tony was still game as shit, man. He kept going, despite everything that he'd been going through, but people are starting to think, like, okay, he's just on a skid. It's not that bad. He'll come back, right? Enter Michael Chandler on UFC 274 on May 7th, 2022. Tony Ferguson's been out for a year now. Been recovering, We're now thinking, all right, yeah, he lost those decisions and he lost a war to Justin Gaethje. He still went 5 rounds with Justin Gaethje. He just got finished in the 5th, right? So, we're like, okay, this is Tony. He's going to come back and he's going to get himself together. He's going to be okay. This one's going to be a good fight.
El Kakua, let's go!
El Kakui! But then, UFC 274, like I said, enter Michael Chandler. And Tony Ferguson would have a very, very successful round 1 against Michael Chandler, knocking him down, getting some control time, almost locking in a submission, and we're like, okay, this is Tony. He's looking good. Like, this is Tony Ferguson. We were worried about you before, but now we're like, okay, yeah, you're doing all right. He had a great round 1 against Michael Chandler. Round 2 happens, and 17 seconds into round 2, you guys have seen the highlight. Michael Chandler's foot goes up, front kick to the face. Tony Ferguson would be flatlined, face down on the canvas. Obviously, a great win for Michael Chandler. Tremendous win against a guy that like dominated the division for a while. Just was never champion. I mean, he was interim champion, but he was never like undisputed champion. And he never really got a chance to fight for the undisputed championship, despite him being this unstoppable force at lightweight.
I was gonna say defeating a boogeyman is always a highlight.
So this is a big win for Michael Chandler. Did wonders for his entire career. But on the other hand, Tony Ferguson just got knocked out. This guy that ate all those punches from Justin Gaethje, that guy that held in there with Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush, these big power hitters, the guy that ate shots from them, the uncrackable chin of Tony Ferguson would finally be cracked by Michael Chandler. And, that this was the first time Tony was ever knocked out. We've never seen this before, ever. Now, after big knockout losses like that, usually, it's tough for a guy to bounce back from something like that.
Can we just do a spotlight on someone
Yeah.
of similar relation in that regard?
Alexander Volkanovski. Anyway.
Side note, though, what the fuck is fucking Sean O'Malley thinking trying to become a double champ?
Like, dude.
Fucker?
Like, you beat Cheeto Vera, which, amazing fight. It was a great fight.
Dude, I wanted you to do that first round.
Exactly. But, Cheeto just hangs in there. That dude's got a chin of vibranium. But, he beat a guy that didn't even deserve to be in that spot in the first place. Yeah. You guys heard the last podcast and how adamant I was that Cheeto Vera shouldn't be fighting this fight. And the only reason why it happened was because Sugar went, Dana, can I have Cheeto?
And yes. As adamant I was that fucking O'Malley's going to do this first round.
I knew it wouldn't happen the first round. And Cheeto's too durable for that.
Yeah, but the dude fucking is a knockout artist. The fucker will hurt you.
I did hurt him. He cracked his skull with the knee.
He'll hurt your soul.
But just Cheeto Vera, I don't know how Cheeto ate that knee. We're going off on a big side note here. But did y'all see the knee that Sean O'Malley delivered on fucking Cheeto? How the fuck did this dude just eat that? I'm like, dude, I would have fucking died. Like, I would be dead.
We're gonna have Strickland coming down with the fucking med kit.
Strickland's coming down with a fucking med kit trying to revive my ass. I'm afraid. But shit, man. Uncrackable chin of Tony Ferguson, though, finally cracked by Michael Chandler. And now we're thinking, that's 4 now. That's tough. And this one was pretty bad. Like, Tony was out. He was stiff as a board. It took him a while to get back up. I remember watching that fight. And I was, like, locked in, like, glued to my screen when the knockout happened. Like, I saw them circling around. I saw Michael Chandler's leg go up. I saw it hit Tony's face. And I saw Tony go face down on the mat. Like, it felt like fucking slow motion when it happened, but I was, like, locked in. I've watched every second of that. And then when Tony face first down on the mat like that, they tried to turn him onto his back. He was still stiff as a board, just out. It was something crazy to see because, I mean, this was a guy that just not that long ago, let's see, to this day, 3 years ago, this guy just 3 years ago was fucking everybody was like, who's going to beat this guy? Like, who's going to beat this guy? Anybody that's put in front of him, he beats. And unfortunately, now that guy that just 3 years ago was unstoppable, this guy that was a boogeyman of the division, the guy that people were even saying could have beaten Khabib, and if they ever fought. And this guy that said all these, that was hyped up to be this, like, absolute boogeyman, to see him fall like that, and to see him stiff as a board, this guy that left people in a pool of their own blood, and knocked people out, submitted people left and right.
Scary motherfucker, not as scary anymore?
Scary motherfucker, not as scary anymore. And just, like, it's like seeing a hero fall type deal. Like, you're just not as good as they once were. And
they got a few years on them now.
Yeah. It was crazy seeing that, because, like, I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, this guy was just killing shit. This guy, I was like, damn, that fight with Khabib would have been really, really close. Do I think Tony would have won? My personal opinion, no. I think Khabib would have beaten Tony, but I think that would have been a crazy fight, and it would have been like a like a Volkanovski and Islam situation where Tony Ferguson shows that Habib's human type deal, but I think Habib would still edge out like a decision victory over him.
Do you think no matter who Habib fought, he would have retired undefeated?
No. To be honest, it's eventual that you're going to lose at some point in this sport. Whether that person might have been Tony Ferguson, you never know. Of course, my humble opinion, based on what I've seen, I can't really go too much off of hypotheticals, but
Yeah, but well, Habib was still wrestling before he retired.
mhm.
Who in his division was gonna stop him or had the best shot?
Charles Oliveira, honestly, he never fought Charles. He never fought Beneil. He never fought Chandler. So I mean,
I haven't seen enough from Leo to think he'd be able to to just be able to say, yeah, no, he would stop him right there.
yeah, but if anybody at that time period, it would have been Tony Ferguson. That could have possibly beaten him. Do I think he would have edged it out against Charles Oliveira? I'm not sure. Do I think he would have edged it out against Beneil? Probably. Do I think he would have beaten Chandler? Most likely. So I mean, unless Chandler just fucking sparks him, like
Unless you
he
know a fucking kick comes up and
just flatlines you.
shadow realms you.
But Tony Ferguson definitely had the biggest chance of getting it out of there, and so didn't. I mean, one of the matches that I thought would possibly be it would be Conor. Conor McGregor at that time was really good, and he was still like doing well despite his inactivity. Obviously, Conor McGregor was probably another best guy in the division, and we saw how that fight played out. I mean, I'm trying to think of like other people that he might have faced. Like,
In the comments, let us know who would have stopped Habib at that time that was in the division.
yeah, it's just like I have trouble believing that he would have retired undefeated, just because it's an eventuality in the sport that you lose at some point. Like, I mean, obviously Floyd Mayweather exists, but a lot of his fights were nobody's, and you know how he won those fights, right? He just hugged them the whole time.
Hey, that's a legitimate strategy.
It is. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of other people that are like going around at the time because like the top five hasn't really changed much since Khabib. I mean, that would have been a fight I'd love to see, Charles Oliveira and Khabib, because like I mean Charles got that jiu-jitsu, he's got good striking. I'd say Charles had better striking than Khabib because I mean Khabib's striking wasn't that great, but his wrestling was his strong point. And I mean, what if Oliveira just actually had a successful hop of the gilly, unlike Dustin Poirier, had an actual like successful hop the gilly and gotten him out of there. I mean, Dustin Poirier hopped gilly on Khabib and nearly finished him. Dustin was the closest to beating Khabib, and I mean he jumped gilly on him, and obviously shows that he was susceptible to that. If Dustin Poirier's hopping gilly and being successful, Charles Oliveira would have been extremely successful at it. So how do we know that the roles aren't reversed there? And like when Habib shoots in and Habib then Charles Oliveira hops gilly, like how do we know that Khabib would have survived that? Plus that's a Charles Oliveira squeeze on your neck. And then what happens? Like, sure, what if he got out of it? Charles Oliveira has a way of getting to your back, even if he's on the bottom. I don't know how he fucking does it, but he just fucking does it. And you know, that could have been a big thing. He never fought Chandler, and I mean Chandler's just an animal to deal with. So I mean, you never know how's Khabib gonna handle a guy like Chandler that just goes in there animalistically and tries to just kill you. But anyway, enough about Habib though. I'm going to go back to Tony Ferguson and say that he would have been the biggest what if for Khabib. Did he have the biggest chance of beating him? Yes. Do I think he would have beaten him? I'm not sure. I don't think I don't think he would have, but I think, like I said, it would have been a Volkanovski and Islam situation, but just it would have been Tony and Habib, both at their prime. Like if we got that fight at 223, like instead of Khabib having to fight Ally Quinta, if we got in that fight then, I think that's what we would have gotten. And then of course, I don't know if he'd ever face Islam, probably not. So I don't think so. Training partners after all. I don't think they'd ever fight each other. But anyway, and next up, after the Michael Chandler loss, Tony Ferguson would face Nate Diaz. Uh, Nate Diaz was on the last fight of his contract, right? And this was also a match that people have always been thinking of, like, oh, how would that fight go? Because I mean, Nate Diaz in his prime beat prime Conor McGregor. You guys are forgetting about that. Like everybody's like, oh, Nate Diaz, he sucks. I'm like, dude, he beat Prime McGregor. You got to think of it that way.
Could you beat Prime McGregor?
Probably not. Like, Nate Diaz is fucking good. I know a lot of people like to write him off because he's like, he's the gangster. He's
Got
the
that
thug.
unwelcome face and
He's
approach
got the
to himself.
thug. He's got the I don't give a fuck approach to everything. Flipping off everybody left and right. But you got to understand, Nate Diaz was a good fighter. And he beat Prime McGregor. And a lot of people love to say, "Oh, Prime McGregor would ice whatever featherweight or whatever lightweight." I'm like, Prime Connor couldn't beat Nate. Nate's that good. But anyway, he would face Nate Diaz. But at this point, guys, Nate's 40 and Tony Ferguson's 38, 39 at the time. So these guys are both way past their fucking primes. And then we get this match. But that also gave you a little bit of hope. Like, this one, Tony could probably win. Because they're both at similar positions in their career. And Tony was winning that fight, I would argue. And I don't know why, but they told him to fucking shoot for a takedown and come round 4. Nate Diaz hopped Gilly and, submitted Tony Ferguson. Guys, this is the first time Tony Ferguson got submitted. It was by Nate fucking Diaz. 2 minutes and 9 seconds left in round 4. And, so in the span of just fucking 2 years, we saw Tony get stopped for the first time against Gaethje. We saw Tony get knocked out for the first time against Chandler. And in the span of 1 year, we saw him get knocked out and submitted in the same year. Shit that nobody would have ever predicted would have happened to Tony Ferguson at this time. But fortunately, man, that's how it went. And that's how it played out. And Nate Diaz won the fight. He rode off into the sunset. We haven't seen Nate Diaz in the UFC octagon since. I mean, yeah, he went on to box Jake Paul, lost that fight. But of course he fucking did. And then UFC 291 would come around on July 29th, 2023. He would face Bobby Green, who once again is that kind of middle of the road fighter. And he could probably beat him if Tony's still there because face it, I mean, Tony did have success against Tony Ferguson. And Tony had success against himself, yes.
I was wondering about that. The elaboration.
Tony had success against Michael Chandler, and Michael Chandler is at the top of his game at this time, right? So you're thinking to yourself, yeah, he's probably still got it. I mean, he knocked down Chandler, he almost beat him, and then he was looking good against Nate, but in the end, he was looking good against an aging Nate Diaz at the time. So I mean, who knows how that would have went, but we know how it went.
I was gonna say.
Well, we know how it went. Well, we know how it went, but I'm saying before then. And then this one, Bobby Green. Now this is a guy, like I said, it's just permanently just stuck at that middle of the road fighter that wins sometimes, but also loses a lot. Kind of like a Michael Johnson in a way. And unfortunately, once again, after having a pretty good round 1 against Bobby Green, Tony would get choked to sleep by an arm triangle from Bobby Green. Now, he never seen that happen before either. It's the first time he got choked unconscious by a guy.
Has it happened since?
No. But at that time, man, oh man, it just sucks watching your heroes fall like that. It's just
one of these days, right?
Mhm.
Because he's not retired yet.
Mhm.
He's gonna have a matchup.
Mhm.
And then me and you are gonna get caught up in one of those freaking BK commercials.
Yeah.
We're gonna go there. We're gonna come back, and it's gonna be him one.
Imagine. We're gonna miss Tony Ferguson winning because we want some Burger King. That's fucking hilarious. So anyway, Bobby Green would choke Tony Ferguson to sleep. Once again, another big win for Bobby Green. But at this point in time, he kind of beat him at the wrong time because he was already getting beat by a lot of guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a big name to beat, so obviously that draws to your record. But if it had happened earlier than that, instead of on 5 loose,
yeah, if it would have happened when Oliveira beat him in 2020, then it would have been a little bit more impressive. That's why when Oliveira beat Tony Ferguson, that was kind of crazy because he beat the Boogeyman. Justin Gaethje beat the guy that was prime at the time, the guy that was coming off of that 12th win. It was going for a 13th, and like Justin Gaethje went to that guy and fucking broke him. And then, of course, then Oliveira would win, Beneil would win. Those would look great on people's resumes. But of course, they won by decision. But when Michael Chandler knocks him out, that's even bigger for Michael Chandler, because then he finished the guy that could never be finished. And then, after UFC 291 though with Bobby Green, UFC 296 just recently on December 16th, 2023, versus Paddy Pimblett. And Tony, I mean, at this point in time, like, we were like, okay, this is a guy that Tony could definitely beat. Paddy is just not the fighter that he's hyped up to be, or at least not that I've seen yet.
He's all hype.
Or at least not that I've seen yet. And Paddy Pimblett would go in there and would win a unanimous decision over Tony Ferguson. Yeah.
But. So, a couple of things to take away from this. Now, when you go up against Gaethje for the first time, that's your first loss, and that's not too bad. At least it was Gaethje, who we know is a fucking monster. When you get knocked out by Chandler, that doesn't look too good. And these two things are like betting odds on this definitely isn't going to happen. When you get choked out to sleep, that's also one of those. This definitely won't happen to fucking a guy Ferguson. It won't happen. But at least it's going up from that. It's a decision.
That's true. At least, like, he's not getting choked to sleep and knocked out and submitted. But at the same time, he lost a unanimous decision to Paddy Pimblett. That's just, what the fuck, Tony? But yeah, that is just where we are to date about Tony Ferguson. Now, guys, I know I was really, really sad explaining the downfall, but we also have to admit that fucking crazy win streak that he had. He went on 12 fights, looked unstoppable in all of them, beating people left and right, submitting people, knocking people out, winning close decisions. He even beat Anthony Pettis once. And, like, he's beating guys like Anthony Pettis, Edson Barboza, all guys that were, like, at the top of their fucking game at the time. He beat RDA, who was also at the top of his game at the time. You beat Kevin Lee, who was looking dangerous at that time. And to think that you are able, that he pulled, like, he left his opponents in, like, a pool of, I'm not even lying, like, he left his opponents in a pool of their own blood. And, like, of course, all the missed fights with Khabib. How we all wish we would have seen Prime Tony versus Prime Khabib. We never know how that one would have gone, because, I mean, Tony's such a well-rounded dude. He's got good striking, he's got good jiu-jitsu, got good wrestling, obviously. He won a championship at one point, then he got somebody like Khabib. It's just unfortunate that we never got that matchup.
And the great thing about Ferguson is he showed up,
Mm-hmm.
He was there, and he let you know that his presence was there.
And because of that big win streak and all the finishes and all the excitement that we had watching Tony Ferguson as he was going through his 6-year fucking tear through the lightweight division from 2013 to 2019. That's a better part of a fucking decade that he was beating people.
Shredding the division.
Just shredding the division. Only losing one time, really, to Michael Johnson early in his career. Until, of course, he ran into Gaethje, and then he's just been on a decline ever since.
I mean, when you look at the first half of the career, your first 3 fights, you get 1 loss, you're still a rookie. And 12 wins?
That's just legendary. That's yet to be repeated by anybody. Like, nobody has gone on that crazy of a run, ever, in the lightweight division. I mean, Khabib. But at the same time, he got fed people that just weren't at his level. Meanwhile, Tony Ferguson's beating guys that are, like, at the elite level at the time. Like I said, top of their game. These guys like Barboza, these guys like RDA, like, and Anthony Pettis, all these guys just that were grilling people. And just him to be grilling them and leaving them in a pool of their own blood, basically, is just leaving a trail of bodies behind him. Hypothetical, obviously, he didn't kill anybody. But,
no, that's not his goal, okay?
That's Strickland's goal.
That's his goal.
That's Strickland's goal. But, like, leaving a trail of fucking contenders behind him and leaving them wounded, and it was a remarkable run, and it's going to go down in UFC history as some of the best work that a fighter has ever done. This guy was fighting crazy. He's fighting 2-3 times a year all the time, looking great in the process. Like finishes after finishes, wars after wars, excitement after excitement.
Hey, Greggy, when are you gonna go 12 wins in a row in 6 years? When's that happening?
But that deserves a good old fucking laugh track. Yeah, Greg. Feel bad. But anyway, it's just this will go down, and Tony Ferguson, even though not becoming a champion, will be one of those guys that was one of the greatest fighters who never won a championship. You know, uh, and he was the most feared guy in the lightweight division for a while. Anytime you saw Tony Ferguson on the contract, your hand was shaking as you went to go and sign it because you just needed that fucking paycheck. Like your hand is shaking as you're going to sign the contract. And his career was revered for the longest time, revered to be one of the best, one of the most exciting runs that somebody's ever had. And even through his losing streak up until like the Chandler knockout, still, and even the losing, still looking pretty good because he's going the distance with these top guys that would eventually challenge for titles or get like big spots on the roster. Like he was the only guy that took Charles Oliveira to a decision on that entire run. That Charles Oliveira run that got into the title. And,
I just thought of a really fun podcast we can do.
Mm-hmm.
A tier list of scariest motherfuckers in UFC. Ranked.
Currently or just in general?
In general.
Tony would have to be on that list somewhere when he was
yeah.
in his prime. It's like we've been seeing two different Tony Fergusons this whole time. You had the one that was on that title, that fucking crazy streak, and just unfortunately never got to fight for the title. And then you also have this version of Tony that we're seeing.
It's a lot like seeing Superman before, and then seeing Superman after we discover Kryptonite.
Exactly. It's been crazy. I mean, obviously that win streak is gonna go down in history. Nobody's ever gonna come close to doing that. I don't think ever. Somebody's gonna come that close to beating Tony's record. But it's not
even
only
if they do, then they're probably not doing it against named guys. Because you got to keep in mind, he's not just chomping at the bit, running through the fucking easy guys that
Habib.
have no shot and shouldn't even be in the ring in the first place.
Habib. Anyway, but it's just it's true because he was beating like big guys at the time, like guys that were guys that were killing it just as much as he was killing it. He was just leaving a trail behind him, saying, "Who's next? Who's next?"
Next up.
And but also, not only is the first part of his career revered and is going to be remembered and go down in history, and I would even say is enough to be a Hall of Famer. It's also tragic in the way that you've watched him fall from grace so suddenly, so crazily over the past 4 years. You're just seeing your hero go down basically, and then on top of that, his string of unfortunate events where he couldn't get like he had big names, but he never had like the biggest names.
I just thought of something really scary.
What's up?
What? I don't think so. But what if Volk winds up following this trail?
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
We might have to do an updated fighter spotlight on him. By the way, if you haven't checked out the Alexander Volkanovski fighter spotlight, that shit's timeless. It's all the way up until his most recent loss at UFC 298. So if you want to go and check that out after this video, by all means, go right ahead. It's timeless and it's as recent as I can make it be. And unfortunately, I can't like see him winning another title. I'm in 2024 here. I'm stuck here. I don't have a time machine. I can't. and then but go ahead and watch that. We're gonna do more of these, obviously. But
it's fun. It allows us to provide content for you, and it keeps us
on our toes.
Schedule.
Yep. So it's gonna be tragic in the way back to Tony though in his career. It's gonna be tragic looking back at it, seeing his downfall and how good he was, how crazy he was to now seeing him as a shell of himself of what he was before. It like just a husk of his former self, and it's just unfortunate to see. Like every single time Tony Ferguson's on the card, I'm like crying internally because I just don't want to see him lose again.
Is he ranked anymore?
No, he hasn't been ranked for a couple years now. And then it's also gonna be tragic because he never really got like I said, the big names. Like he never got the McGregor fight when it made all the right sense for him to get the McGregor fight. He never got the Habib fight. That was just a stretch of injuries and unfortunate events that just, and then of course Habib's early retirement that just never made it materialize.
Dude, I think it would be cool if we had seen Oliveira rematch with him after Oliveira got his championship.
That would have been crazy, but unfortunately, by that time, when Oliveira got his championship, Tony was already on the decline. The same card that Charles Oliveira won his championship on, Tony lost to Beneil, you know, and it's sad looking at it because like this is one of my favorite fighters ever. Like he's up there for me. I love Tony for how he was and everything that he did. I appreciate him for everything he did, how active he was, how exciting he was, and how much of a treat it was when you saw Tony Ferguson at the top of the card. You knew that that was going to be a good fight. Now, looking back at it, it's just such a 180 because now I see Tony on the card, and instead of feeling joy and excitement, I feel sad. And I'm like sad and anxious for him because I just don't want to see him lose again. But forever, his career's filled with what ifs and maybes, as well as a crazy fucking downfall. Like, what if he never had that Gaethje fight?
Yeah, what if Gaethje didn't crack him?
What if Gaethje didn't crack him? What if Michael Chandler never knocked him out? Like, and the maybes of maybe he would have beaten this guy. Maybe if he didn't lose to Gaethje, maybe he would have gone on to beat Oliveira. You know, like it's just a bunch of what ifs and maybes. But regardless of his losing streak that he's on right now, he's always going to remain in the good graces of the fans. He's undeniable to this point, and I'm sure myself, Anthony, and everybody alike will forever cherish Tony Ferguson for what he was before.
What he did for the division.
What he did for the division.
What he brought to UFC.
What he brought to UFC and how much entertainment that he gave us through his run. And of course, we're gonna wish the best for Tony El Kukui Ferguson. Anthony, any final thoughts? That's about it for me.
He's gonna win his next match and then go on a championship streak.
One can hope, right? Fingers crossed. 40-year-old Tony Ferguson going to the top. Joe Teixeira won a title at 42. I mean, shit. We're going to hold on to it tight. But anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in for the Tony Ferguson Fighter Spotlight. I hope you enjoyed it.
Recommend us other spotlights you want to see.
Recommend us other spotlights, or else we're just going to keep making the ones that we want to make. So,
I mean, eventually we'll probably get through all of them.
Yeah. And, of course, tune in next time. We're going to be going over... I don't know who we're gonna go over next time, but it's probably gonna be in.
Well, we got 300 first.
Well, 300's gonna not. 300's not for another month.
Yeah. No. Well.
Yeah. So
we'll figure out what's brewing. Still.
We'll figure out what's brewing, and we might actually. Even Greggy. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. No, it's not. But
Greggy is not showing up for anything. Unless it's proper 12.
Unless it's proper 12. Or Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal. But anyway. That'll do it for this episode. We're probably going to come at you with another Fighter Spotlight next week, seeming as next week's fight card also isn't that exciting. So, but of course, if we see something special, we're going to make a video.
Could we write to Bezos to have him purchase a Greggy fighting Habib? He's pretty rich.
I mean, I don't know if our little voices are going to reach Jeff Bezos.
Write him.
I mean, we can definitely try. But, who fucking knows? Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in for the Fighter Spotlight on Tony El Kukui Ferguson, and we will see you next time.